Hello and welcome to the Nitty Gritty Writing Podcast. I'm Simon Canton.
And I'm Dave Higgins.
And today we're going to be talking about the importance of a twist, or the power of a twist. But before we do that, we'll do our usual weekly roundup. Dave, do you want to go first?
Okay. Another drabble, written, polished, and published. About halfway through a short story to submit for a collection. What else? See, it's been a fortnight because we took the bank holiday weekend off, so actually been two drabbles. So halfway through a short story now, so I should have that done, fingers crossed, by the end of the month. And apart from that, the latest build of Firefox seems to have gone a little bit odd on me. So I've been spending some time trying to track down what it is that's going on. And I seem to have got a problem that doesn't exist, or at least doesn't exist for people who think using any of the same words I do. So I search and you've gone down the rabbit hole when your search turns up things about compatibility problems caused by the release of Windows XP. I'm thinking, equals about the release of Windows XP on the first page of a Google search. Your search terms really aren't the kind of thing that anyone else is looking for.
Yeah, I mean, Firefox seems to be doing really weird things, like the development team. They're like, from my standpoint, since I have to make things that work on all the browsers, they're different from every other browser. They're doing what Internet Explorer were doing 5 years ago or 4 years ago, whatever. Internet Explorer was completely different than any other browser and had different commands and different code and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I don't know. They seem to be. I was watching a talk on YouTube. They seem to be doing something with Firefox. They're coming up with like version 2 or version whatever it is at this stage, like a complete rejig of the whole thing. But I think that'll take them a while. So yeah, it doesn't really help you, other than to say I sympathize. So yeah, for me, let's see, the last 2 weeks, I don't know if I mentioned that I started on Killer President, which is the fourth Kyra Sarin book. I've written about 6,000 words there, but I'm having trouble with it because I just don't have any enthusiasm for it, and which is something we discussed before, where you're meant to write the next book in the series, but you don't really want to write the next book in the series.
Yeah.
So I mentioned when Kevin was on, what I'd really like is to be like Michael Crichton, where he writes a long book, but it's a standalone one-off. There's never going to be anything else, like Jurassic Park and a sequel, but normally there's never going to be anything else in that universe. And I'm wondering whether I should drop something I'm not enthusiastic about. I am very enthusiastic about our Dragons and Magic book because it's a really cool idea and we've come up with some cool things about it. Whether I should just go on to that. There's no way, like, do I write for my readers or do I write for me? And it should be essentially for me if I'm going to put in loads of time for little money. So yeah,
I find this is why I tend to have more than one thing going at once. Is I get times when I do slump on a project and it just seems tedious. So if I swap to something else, it's not quite a grass is greener effect. I don't think it's more that sometimes the reason I just really feel burnt out on something is because part of me knows there's a problem, but my conscience hasn't worked out that there is a problem and what it is. If I take a break and just let it work through in the back, there's been several projects where I've thought, I have to give this up. It's not engaging me. And I'll do something else, come back. And the first thing I do is go, well, this bit's terrible. And I cronk out the terrible bit because you've got an idea about how to fix the terrible bit. And then boom, back into it. And after a while of doing that a couple of times, I realized that actually, when I'm getting burnt out on something, I haven't spotted that terrible bit. It's the bit that doesn't work that I fix when I come back to something, having left it for a while, that then gets me restarted. So maybe you're just not seeing what it is that isn't gelling about Kairos. So maybe it's not abandoning it, maybe it's just setting it aside. Or maybe it is, but yeah. And if it's not working,
well, I mean,
you're not.
I mean, I think setting it aside, like not saying I'll never do this ever again and burning it or anything, but not planning to come back to it essentially, unless I suddenly get really enthusiastic and want to come back to it.
Well, yeah, people talk a lot about whether you should write for yourself or write for your readers, but for me, they both boil down to one thing, that I've written things that I had to write, business documents and so on, and they don't have the same zing as business documents that actually I was engaged in writing. So given that fiction is more of an emotive, visceral thing than a memorandum on some aspect of environmental law or whatever, I think sort of forcing yourself to write for your readers when you're not grokking it is going to result in a book that potentially lacks that zing that your readers are looking for from your work. Because the story, anyone could write Bruce Willis as a wisecracking female space soldier, but only your version of it is what makes it the Kairos novels. So if you're not grokking that at the moment, then if you push yourself to write it, it's not going to have that Canton feel to it necessarily. So it's not going to be the book the readers want anyway.
Yeah, I think I'm going to. I think I'm going to drop it, and then, as I say, the Dragons of Magic book, I am enthusiastic about it. I mean, I started writing the opening and was kind of like, oh, this is what writing feels like, rather than trying to drag a boulder up a hill. Oh, and the other thing I was going to mention that I did this week was I wrote another couple of drabbles and sent one of them out to my mailing list. What I tend to do, I don't know, I think you don't do this, Dave, but correct me. I write a bunch, or 2 or 3 at least, and then just pick the one I like the most, rather than writing one and then fine-tuning it until it's...
My process is different. I mean, I mull on ideas for a single sort of seed idea, something that's really dense, where I feel that there's a punchy moment there that isn't sort of almost the opposite of a novel. In the novel, you're looking for something that is going to switch back and forth a lot and will intertwine with other threads. So I'm looking for the opposite, something that doesn't need lots of other threads, something where all of the context the reader needs is already going to be there for pretty much anyone. So you're narrowing it and then trying to narrow it down to something that fits in exactly 100 words.
Yeah. Oh, that's another thing. I mentioned this to Dave on email, but I've changed to 200 words. And I'm not sure if people prefer it or not. So I asked in the email, I said, hey, I've changed this to 200 words instead of 100. What do you think? I got one reply that said, I like this better, and one reply that said, I don't like this as much.
Yeah.
So I think I'll go with what I prefer, which is 200 words. Like 200 words is not massive, but it's enough that I can put in more description and that kind of stuff.
It's got a bit more. It's got a bit more room, but you still have to take care of what you're putting in. You can't stick in extraneous detail. So it's still distilling the story down.
Yeah. And to give a very short version of my week's one, this week was a teenage girl is walking towards a motorway, and she looks back and there's cars zooming by. She looks back and her friends are like, go on. And then she tries to run across the motorway, gets hit by a car, goes flying up, gets hit by another car, and everything goes black. And then when she wakes up or can see again, her father's standing over her saying, just because you can't die doesn't mean you should throw your life away, which is a twist. So that kind of takes us on to our subject, which is certainly for drabbles, twists have been very, like, the best feedback I get is when I've got a twist. I mean, I've only had 3 so far, but people are like, oh, what's going to happen next? Or why is that the case, or whatever. So that's great. And in terms of consuming stories, like watching TV or reading or whatever, something being predictable, I think, is one of the worst crimes possible. I was watching a movie last night and nothing unpredictable happened. Like someone said, like, it was a war movie. It's a new Netflix movie, a war movie in Iraq, I think. And so all the locals are saying, I'm not going to work with you. I'm not going to work with you, to the Americans. And then one local says, I'll work with you if you help the kids in this school. And I was like, well, he's dead. And guess what? 20 minutes later, he's dead. And it was just the most predictable, obvious movie ever. Like, there was a guy walking around with a cooler. I was like, well, that's a bomb. Yeah, it's a bomb. I mean, there was no twists. There was nothing unpredictable. Which then just made me go, well, it went from a movie that was okay to a movie that was, which is kind of, you need something there. You need at least one twist in an entire movie. And in a book, you need more, because there's a lot more story there. And like, I'm reading a book at the moment. I forget it's called Space Force or something. And have you read it, Dave? It's a comedy, sci-fi comedy thing. It's quite similar to Green Star, really. Where
can you remember?
I can look it up, I guess. I'm not even sure if it's called Space Force, but I can look at my sales or my purchases. I mean, Space Team by Barry J. Hutchinson.
Author's name's vaguely familiar. I might have read something else by him.
But what I was going to say was that it's perfectly competently written. Like, it's a good book, but it's very predictable. Like, I would say that this is a good book, and if it had twists in it, it would become a great book. As just an example, or like, even going to my own stuff. I mean, I'm sure I've written books where it's pretty A to B to C. So, I mean, I think I struggle with this a bit, because there's the whole hero's journey, and that is fairly predictable. Like, if you see an old guy who is like a mentor figure, you're like, well, 75% or 50 to 75% of the way through, he's going to croak. The bad guy's going to kill him somehow.
Or he'll turn out to be the bad guy.
Yeah, which is worse. That's way worse. That just makes me groan every time. There's the side character who's like a funny guy being the bad guy, or the mentor being the bad guy. Any of those are not really twists because there's a limited number of characters. So it just we've seen it so much. It was probably original at one stage, but it isn't original now.
Yeah, I can remember. Must have maybe 30 years ago, because it was children's television. There was a series of linked movies about children traveling through time with a professor, pursuing another professor who'd stolen a different time machine. And 2/3 of the way through this series of linked movies, it turned out the first professor who'd taken the children with him, for reasons I can't remember and probably wouldn't make sense when viewed as an adult, was the bad guy. And the person he was chasing was desperately trying to set things right. And the children ended up swapping professors, and then the story continued in much of the same time machine tasting time machine way. But I remember at the time thinking, oh, that wasn't particularly startling. I don't know whether that was because it was a children's show, so they'd sort of hung a lantern on all the evidence that things weren't what they seemed, or whether I was actually jaded enough about the wise old mentor turns out to be a villain trope that even as a tween or whatever I was at the time, it struck me as, oh, not again.
Yeah, and I think a twist has to be both inevitable and completely unforeseen. So inevitable in that you've set it up, so when you look back, you go, oh, yeah, that was obvious if I'd thought about it. But unforeseen in that it's not the first 5 or 10 things that you think of. Because people are going to be sitting there going, well, maybe the mentor is the bad guy, or maybe the sidekick is the bad guy, or maybe this, or maybe that.
Yeah.
And you want to be ahead of them. There's no point in just you do exactly what they'd already thought of, because then they could have written the story. So I think the best shows, or the best TV shows at least, and the best books as well, and best stories, are ones where they surprise me in the first couple of minutes of either reading or watching, because then I know I'm in good hands, because they've managed to, in a short amount of time, put in a twist. Like the start of The Girl with All the Gifts is an amazing start, because the first 5 pages has a massive twist. I'm not going to say what it is, and if you haven't read the book, you should go read it before the movie comes out, because the movie's probably going to suck. I don't know, maybe the movie would be good. I'd probably see it just to see. Anytime there's a really good book, you want to see the movie just to see if they did it justice at all. But anyway, point being that, or The Martian, similarly, in the first few pages, there's a bit of a twist, or the first line, pretty much, is, I guess, it's something that you are not expecting to see, I guess, is how I'd put it. Or this TV show I was watching called, I can't remember. It's a time traveler thing on Netflix, which is really good. But the first episode, it starts showing this person, and then a timer comes up on the screen with the words "time till death." And you're going, wow, what the heck is that? And it starts counting down. And you're like, well, that person's going to die. And like, it's such an original idea to tell the audience this person is going to die in 1 minute and 36 seconds. yeah, it's a great show. But things like that, like a twist doesn't have to be the mentor was the bad guy all along. It could be a twist on the format of the story, or it could be a twist on any kind of reader expectation, I think.
Yeah.
Like,
It's like,
and go ahead.
I read an interesting book a couple of weeks ago now, but the review went up yesterday on my blog. So for those of you who haven't read the review, presumably because you're saving the blog for tomorrow, so you can have a relaxed Sunday catching up on my work, because everyone follows my blog, right? It was young adult girl going to a new school narrative mashed up with a sort of James Bond spy thriller. So funky gadgets and a young adult, I don't fit in at school, which of the guys with the perfect hair do I actually like, which of them actually likes me, how am I ever going to be popular, do I want to be popular, type of thing. And that was really good, because the thing that usually niggles me about young adult is the I'm klutzy, apart from when it really matters, when I've got all these elite skills. And, oh no, I am... And these two really good-looking guys who seem to have trouble keeping their shirts on fancy me, and one of them's supernatural and the other's destined to invent pork rinds or something. So, but this, where it actually sort of, the being really good at things had a good solid grounding. And so it was plausible that in a pinch, the protagonists could do things. But obviously they weren't used to being at this school. So the whole young adult awkwardness that usually irritates me when it's the primary thread, where it's about being a teenager at a new school, worked here because it was the reason why the person with all the gadgets and the great skills fumbled it up. So it made it more plausible rather than irritating. So that was a great twist on the format, as it were, or twist on the two formats, depending on how you look at it.
Ed had a great idea. I won't share his idea and spoil it, but had a great idea for splicing two genres. I'm just hearing myself back. That's why I'm speaking in a very disjointed way. Sorry. He had a great idea for splicing two genres, and I think there's a tendency for people to get quite lazy with that. Like they'll say, okay, well, I like zombie movies and I like Star Trek, so I'm going to do zombie Star Trek. And that's something that you can't be surprised when there's 6 million zombie Star Trek books out there. That putting two things together, just two very popular things, is obviously not going to work as well. Well, it's not going to be unexpected, to put it that way. So you've got a choice. You can either, I think it falls into a trap where if you've got pirates versus zombies, that is the thing that's drawing people to it. So as soon as that has been done before, then you're screwed. Whereas if you're doing a normal subgenre like steampunk, people are not going to your book saying, oh wow, imagine a world where everything runs on Steam, because that's just been done so much that now it's about the actual books rather than it just being the novelty of pushing two things together. So I think you're kind of in in several layers of needing to deviate from expectations there. You don't like, you either want to match something entirely, which is like Chris Rock's Right to Market kind of thing, or deviate so wildly that no one's been, or to your best knowledge, no one has walked that road before. Like someone was talking about Shawshank Redemption online today. I was like, well, no one could say that was an unoriginal idea to do as a movie, because it's not like there was a whole run of good guy goes to prison movies in the 80s and 90s that they were just following up on. So I guess either, my point being, either follow formula, in which case you're going to, I guess, satisfy audiences quite well, like Star Wars, for instance. Star Wars follows formula. It follows the hero's journey exactly, as does The Matrix. So you can certainly be a success by following, not doing any twists. At no point, like even like if you take The Matrix, for instance, I'm a mild spoiler, I guess, for The Matrix, but not really, because it follows hero's journey. But when he dies at the end, at no point was there any part of me who went, "Oh well, he's dead," because that was such an expected step that I'd seen so often before, that the hero dies and then, but he's really not dead because he was hanging on with his fingertips, or he, the worst is someone says "I love you" and then the other hero comes back to life, for zero reason at all. But that's an immensely successful movie and a very good movie, so you can do no twists. But I think I don't know, my inclination would be to be different rather than be the best of the ones that are the same formula. I think it's more it'd be easier to write something that was completely unique and have some success, not in terms necessarily in terms of sales, but in terms of appeal to readers, than it would be to just do what The Matrix does but better. I think might be quite difficult to do. At the same time, if you're breaking rules, you should know what the rules are. That kind of goes without saying. So yeah, are there any twists that jump to mind, Dave?
Oh, the twist that immediately springs to mind is the Memento. Both for the twist on the detective genre and for the actual twist and twist and twist and twist that they can do with a chap who doesn't remember for longer than a minute or so. So that's constantly reframing the reader's expectations, and each time it fits. So potentially that's a masterclass in how to do twists well, because every time, certainly the first time you watch it, how well it works from then on depends on your memory, I think. But the first time you watch it, each time you jump back in time a little bit and see what actually led up to what he's done, it's not what you expect, but it's perfectly consistent. So there might be a lesson about writing twists there, that maybe you start from the other end, start with your ending, and then come up with a way you could have got there, work your way backwards, and then chop it around a bit, sort of try to The other thing is evidence. And it doesn't work in Memento because you're not getting any foreshadowing. But usually with a twist, people foreshadow it. Because if I suddenly pulled off a mask and revealed that I was Barack Obama, people would be startled, but no one would expect it. So it wouldn't necessarily work as a twist. It would work as a shock. Ha, gotcha. But it's not going to satisfy anyone. Whereas if I'd been very carefully setting it up, there'd be people who worked it out well enough that they went, ha, I knew it, and felt good that they'd beaten me. Which I think moves beyond to twists that don't work. The Sherlock Holmes books. I like Holmes and Watson as a character dynamic. But the books don't really work as modern detective novels. Because you can't get the twist. The one that always springs immediately to mind is the one where Holmes moves the investigation forward because there was red mud on someone's shoe, and there was red mud at this particular site. But you find this out by Watson going to Holmes, but Holmes, how did you know this? And Holmes goes, well, I noticed that there was a smudge of red clay on the carpet next to his boots. And I noticed 2 days earlier, while inspecting the crime scene, that there was red clay where the flower beds had been turned over. And the first time, I thought, oh, damn, I missed some clues. And so you reread the story, because they're quite short, and when he's checking the crime scene, doesn't mention the flower bed, doesn't mention the clay. Checking the carpet, doesn't mention the carpet. It's not there. And so that's a really, from a reader's perspective, crappy twist, because Holmes is pulling out things that you couldn't have known. So yeah, it fits the evidence, but it doesn't fit what you've shown the reader. So I think with a twist, it has to not just be consistent with reality. It has to be consistent with the bits of reality you've given to the reader.
Jonathan Creek always did a good job with that. Did you ever watch Jonathan Creek?
Jonathan Creek is brilliant on the pieces being there and the twist being something that you would never in a million years have worked out. But it's, once you've seen it, it's the only thing that explains all of the pieces.
Mm.
And the other thing that Jonathan Creek does well is having characters who react to the twists without lanterning things. So sometimes Jonathan gets it wrong and he curses himself for getting it wrong, but he's got it wrong in a way that fits the evidence. And so he's working well, both as the detective to put the twist in place and let the reader know what it is, and as the reader's avatar in the world to make the mistakes, to put 4 things together and come up with, well, it's a bit crazy, but here's how to explain all of these 4 things. So you're kind of playing along with him rather than just watching what he discovers and then, oh, turns out he's cleverer than I am again.
It reminds me, Tintin was doing, I'm going through all the Tintin books really with my son at this stage. And there's the Scepter of something or other. And Thompson and Thompson are the roles in that, where the scepter's been stolen. So Thompson and Thompson go, well, it was probably this. And then the people explain why it wasn't that. And then they try something to say it's probably this. And they try it and then they hit themselves. And that way Tintin doesn't look stupid for trying 20 different things. Thompson and Thompson get to look stupid and serve that role in the story. So yeah, I think you need to be ahead, and like Westworld was an incredibly twisty show, and was spoiled by the internet because everyone just kept discussing it until they came up with the actual idea, because that was a show where they'd worked it out really well. They'd shown you all the clues, so that once you realized what the twist was, it made perfect sense, and you went, oh, that is the twist. Like, there was no doubt about it. It was, oh, I found it out. Which kind of destroys it. But that shows you that, I mean, that was an incredibly successful series, and hopefully season 2 will be just as good. But it just shows you that putting twists in and putting things in, mysteries in, is what humans want. They want to be discussing what could possibly be happening next, and want to kind of be left hanging. The other thing I was just going to mention was you also have to be careful of setting up your twist too much. So True Detective season 1 was a good example of this, where they were putting all these little clues out, and you were going, what's this going to be? This is amazing, all these clues, and I have no idea. And then it was just, is that bloke? What? That's not a twist. No, the twist is that all those clues were meaningless, and it's just that bloke. That's not a twist. You have to have a satisfying twist that makes sense. As Dave says, you have to set up all these clues. The clues have to come together and mean something, and you have to go, oh, that was, I wouldn't ever have guessed that, but it makes perfect sense.
There has to be a way for the reader to put it together. It can be really unfeasible. It can be something where you would never, in a reasonable or even unreasonable amount of time, put it together. But for me, for it to be a satisfying twist, there has to be that moment where you go, of course, that all makes sense. And I could have worked that out if I put more time and effort into it. And like sometimes you can get away with a specialist filling in a gap. So, is it Numbers, the FBI agent whose brother's a maths professor? Some of the twists in that, it was incredibly complex maths. And you'd get a piece of maths that I couldn't do that would solve it. But because maths is a logical thing where you put the inputs in and answers come out, and so it fits, all of the pieces produce a result, that's okay. But something that the reader can do that is just subverted. So the reader puts a lot of effort into watching True Detective. They pick up the clues, they put the jigsaw pieces together, and then it's like, oh yeah, actually, we weren't doing a jigsaw, we were making toast. It pulls the rug out.
I mean, it's the Chekhov's gun thing. If you put something on the stage, you have to use it. Like in the movie, the terrible movie I was watching last night, one guy turns to the other guy and goes, "Oh, you're A positive blood type, just like me," and then that never comes up again. Why mention the blood types? I was thinking, okay, that guy's going to get injured, and the other guy has to donate blood or something, or there'll be some significance to it. No, just random conversation.
Yeah.
So yeah, people expect that you won't just show random stuff on the screen. That it's either going to have some significance to the character, it's going to develop the character or reveal the character in some way, or to the story and the plot, but not just random events. That's not a very satisfying story.
Yeah, you can do it. You can do it more easily, I think, in visual where the foreground event is random, but the purpose of it is the old magician's watch my hand, don't watch the other hand thing, where you have something that is useful to solving whatever the story's crisis is happen in the background. So it's there for the viewer to see, but because they're focused on this irrelevant detail of the blood type or whatever, it uses the fact that if the people get into a conversation about something that's not trivial small talk, you'll assume it's relevant to draw you away from something that's being shown to you.
Yeah, but I think audiences are getting to the stage, like, to give an example, if you were watching a show and it was framed like this, like I was off here at the side and it was showing the door, you'd be going, well, someone's coming through that door, or something significant's happening at that door. Or if it was a window, you'd be watching the window. You wouldn't be watching the characters. You'd be like, yeah, there's someone's going to appear at the window, something's going to happen with the window, something there.
Yeah, I'm thinking more that you're framed like this, so it's you be in the center, you apparently are the focus, and the clue is maybe on the bookshelf, and you're podcasting about 128-bit encryption, say. So people are going to think, so that's going to be vaguely relevant. And actually, it's got nothing to do with encryption. It's that there's something on your bookshelves. That can work if done sparingly. But obviously, with sort of potentially more ability for people to read all of the bookshelf than we've got at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it would have, if you had a stack of books here and the top one said something, and
yeah, I'm saying it's just, you just sort of, so you don't, definitely you have to avoid lamp lighting it. But not lamp, I don't mean lamp light, hanging a lantern on it. I'm getting my terms in a muddle.
Don't gaslight the audience.
Yeah, but actually that's strangely fitting. And obviously, betraying the audience isn't the same as cruelly manipulating people, but to an extent, it is similar in that you're creating a false reality for the reader or the viewer, which is what you don't want to be doing. You can't create this reality and then claim that it's different.
Grant, well, I think that lull is a good place to stop. Is there anything you wanted to add at the end, Dave?
I don't think so, no.
Make sure to check out Dave's Drabbles and my Drabbles over on our websites. Thank you all very much for watching, and we will see you next time.
Bye for now.